Hello everyone. So today we're going to be teaching the University of North Carolina 12 probe. This is also known as the UNC probe. It is an assessment instrument that measures the periodontal pocket depth. And there are three parts of the probe: the handle, which is from here to here, the shank, and the working end. The working end and the shank meet at a defined angle of 90 degrees or more. It is a rod shaped. It has a blunt end and it's slender in appearance as well. So there are many different ways to read this probe. It has 12 indicators on the probe itself. This is a UNC 12. There's also a UNC 15. And the way you would measure it, where's my probe, is when you go into the pocket, every time a line disappears, it's an indicator mark. So here it would be 2 millimeters, then it would go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and so forth. So this would be measuring the periodontal pocket depth. And there are a lot of indications for this instrument. It measures the health of the periodontal tissue probing depth, the clinical attachment level, the relative attachment level. It also is able to measure bleeding on probing. So whenever you insert it and it bleeds, you can record that. There's keratinized gingiva that you can record, gingival recession, and the size of atypical or pathologic lesions. It can also record diastemas and overjets and overbites. So it'll be measured in millimeters for those. The grasp that you should have when holding this instrument is a modified pen grasp. When inserting it and probing, you should have a light grasp, and you should pass over any calculus when recording to get an accurate result. And you'll know you're probing correctly when the tissue blanches. Some contraindications for this instrument are you should not probe when there's an active infection, recent periodontal surgery such as a periodontal flap, edentulous patients who have no teeth, and people who have implants because it will go straight to the pocket, and any newly erupted teeth. They also say you shouldn't probe on someone who has orthodontics because it wouldn't give you an accurate measurement because those teeth are mobile and continuously moving. You should wait until after the patient is done with their ortho. So for the angulation of this instrument, you want to always make sure that the probe is angled towards the apex of the root, similar to the shape of a pizza. So you always want to make sure it's towards the root. You also want to be tilted away from the surface of the tooth so it can be angled into the sulcus. When probing interproximally, however, you want to make sure you tilt the probe 10 to 15 degrees into that cold space. Also with this instrument, you have a specific working order and a stroke. When probing, you want to make sure you have a walking stroke. You don't want to be just stabbing it into the gingiva, and you want to make sure it's not facing the tooth completely, like pressed on the tooth, because you'll be hurting the patient. You also want to know the complete working order. We start off at tooth number 1 on the buccal surface, and we probe all the way to tooth number 16. Then we do the palatal surface of those teeth from 16 back to 1. Then we start back on the mandibular at tooth number 32. And then we go to tooth number 17 on the buccal surface. And then on the lingual surface, we start off at 17 and go back to 32. The tooth is also divided into 6 parts, and you will always get the deepest probing depth for each section that you're probing. So the first part is the distal lining angle all the way to the interproximal space where the coal is. And let's say you have a probing depth of 1 over here, but by the interproximal you have a probing depth of 6, you will measure it at a 6. Then you start back at the distal line angle and you get to this space almost interproximally, and whichever is the deepest number is what you will be recording. Then from here you get back into the coal space and you angle it 10 to 15 degrees every time you're at the interproximal space of the coal. So for educational purposes, we will be calculating the cal of tooth number 30 of a person who is in health. So when probing, you want to make sure you stabilize your fulcrum and have that modified pen grasp, and you'll be going into the gingival pocket, and then you will tilt 10 to 15 degrees in that coal space. That periodontal depth is a 3. Then you'll go back to the distal line angle and again measure. It is a 3. And then you'll start, and you won't take it out. The only time you take it out is when leaving the distal line angle. We're going to tilt 10 to 15 degrees. That is a 2. This patient doesn't have any recession, so the gingival margin will be measured in a negative number. So each time it would be a -3, a -3, and a -2. So the patient's clinical attachment level for tooth number 30 is 0 for all those numbers. So when doing the lingual surface of this tooth, you actually start at the mesial line angle and work mesially, and then you go distally. That is because at the midline, the areas switch because you want to make sure you get the distal line angle last when recording. So you'll start at the mesial line angle, work it interproximally, then tilt 10 to 15 degrees. And the deepest probing depth for that is a 4. Then you're going to go back to the mesial line angle, and this time you don't pick it up. And you stop here at the distal, and that deepest probing depth is a 4. And then you get to the interproximal space again and tilt 10 to 15 degrees. And that deepest probing depth is a 5. In the next clip, you'll see me probe from tooth numbers 1 all the way to 16, and then 16 to 32 in a speed, just to show you exactly how the motion goes.
Four.